I want to welcome AgileXRM to the podcast. I've known the people at AgileXRM for the past 12 years. I've seen how their business process management tool can add massive value to complex organizational processes in sectors such as finance and government. If you have complex processes or a need for dialogues on the Power Platform or Dynamics 365, take a look at how this BPM tool can add value. You can find them at agilexrm.com or check out the show notes for more details. Welcome to the Power 365 show, where I interview staff at Microsoft across the Power Platform and Dynamics 365 technology stack. I hope you'll find this podcast educational and inspire you to do more with this great technology. Now, let's get on with the show. Today's guest is from Redmond in the United States. He works at Microsoft as a senior program manager. In the show notes, we'll have links to his bio and LinkedIn and things like that if you want to find out more information. But with that, welcome to the show, Nathan.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate you having me.
It's good to have you on the show. I always like to get to know the guests from a what do they do when they're not working perspective. And so with that in mind, tell me about family, friends, fun. What do you do when you're not working for Microsoft?
Got it. Well, I've got twin 11-year-old boys, so they keep me pretty busy. My house is a lot of activity. So it's mostly, just trying to keep up with them. We're really into, board games and playing outside, video games, music, that kind of stuff. I like to cook a lot. We do some family book clubs, lots of reading. So yeah, that kind of good stuff.
Very cool. Very cool. And have you always been in Seattle?
Mostly for my professional career. I was in Salt Lake City before that. I grew up there, and my first few years were at a PC manufacturer that's no longer around in the U.S. Moved over to Microsoft about 23 odd years ago.
Wow.
And been there ever since.
Wow, you've seen some changes.
Yes, I have. Came in right around Windows XP. And so I've seen through some stuff.
So was Steve the CEO then, or did he come? Were you there pre him being CEO?
It was that was Steve. Yeah. So Steve was CEO then, and as a matter of fact, there were a few launch parties around Windows XP and Office XP that I saw both Bill and Steve there, right up front, congratulating folks and signing copies of stuff like that. So it was pretty cool. It was still a huge company by that point, but it's still, it was years ago and back when the originators were still kind of around.
That's very cool. So how did you get involved with the Microsoft Biz Apps?
Well, really, it was a series of kind of moves within the company. There's a lot of times when you'll be working on a product and that product will need people to work on it quite as much anymore. And so there's kind of reorganizations. And I kind of ended up in Biz Apps as part of a reorganization, but I'm really happy I did because it's a really cool area. There's a lot going on, a lot of interesting technological problems to solve, a lot of great opportunities. And so, I've been here for about 4 years in the Biz App space, all of it within the Power Platform and Dataverse. And I think it's a fantastic place to be. There's a lot of great velocity going on right now with the different technologies and the different things we're trying to do.
So true. This show we wanted to discuss Access, Microsoft Access, and I find it's funny because most people at some time, if you've been in IT for any time, you would have done something in Access. You would have built Access databases and things like that. What surprises me is the number of customers that still use Access as a mission critical application, right? And it's kind of like low code 1.0, right? A subject matter expert in the business said, hey, I can work out the relationships between these tables and put them in. I can create those and for some people, that was their introduction to databases. And so it's been around a while. What has motivated Microsoft, and particularly inside the Dataverse team, to go, you know what, we need a migration path from something that has, it might never intended originally to become a mission critical application, but through time, it ended up there, right? And so now, of course, there's massive risk with an Access database in that, one, there's the internal security risk, in other words, the ability to have data leakage from within inside an organization.
Mhm.
It was never designed in the cloud-centric world that we live in now. And then there's the version. Is the version that I'm using the current version? Is that being maintained? Who's doing it? Is it under the control of IT, or is it still sitting in shadow IT? And of course, a lot of what we get in the Power Platform addresses that. What was Microsoft's motivation, lens, etc., to decide, we need an easy migration path from Access to Dataverse?
That's a really interesting story because it really wasn't Dataverse that approached. Access actually came to us.
Wow.
So Access had been hearing from its customers for a while now that they had some needs.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them were saying, we want to take our data mobile. And there was an attempt to kind of go cloud-based for a while there on Access a few versions back.
Mm-hmm.
And things just didn't work out the way they had hoped. And then there were a lot of pushes for people to take their data also into a more secure space.
Yeah.
Especially nowadays, there's a lot of talk about compliance
Mm-hmm.
and governance. And so because of kind of those limitations of Access, where you do have sort of an open model of security that you aren't able to lock down as well as you'd like to, there was a lot of requests of, how can we get this more secure? How can I access this mobily? How can I put this in the cloud where other people can get to it? And they came to us over in the Power Platform side, over to Dataverse specifically, and said, hey, is this something you guys would be interested in doing? And really, we were. Yeah. When I first heard about it, I thought, that's really interesting. Like you, I was not aware how widely Access was still used, but it's actually still a very strongly used application. And you were saying, kind of started out earlier as like an entry-level database. It wasn't quite like SQL or something really powerful, but a lot of companies and businesses and enterprise level businesses run their business on Access. At least maybe not all of it, components of it, but Access is a very commonly used application, and there's a lot of strong development that goes on with that as well. They've got a big development audience and some MVPs that are very passionate, and they've got a lot of this great capabilities of things that they've put out, but they're still unable to kind of meet a few of those goals just because of the the structure and the architecture of Access.
Yeah.
So we kind of put our heads together and came up with the best of two worlds. We thought of different ways to make sure that you could get that data into Dataverse. So we could use that AAD level security. We could have role-based security,
Nice.
really kind of provide that tighter governance as people want to have, but also not keep people from utilizing the functionality they're used to. One of the key rules that we set for ourselves were that Access forms needed to continue to work. So people who move their data out of Access into Dataverse, they can still use their forms, they can still use their queries. So really, to them, it could happen in the background from an IT manager and nothing would change for their daily work. Everything would work as it always has. And the reason for that is there's a lot of investment in people's Access client UIs. And also, it takes time to learn how to build an app. And maybe you want to figure out the best way to handle this. Do I want Canvas or Model? Do I need to have automation? That the Access functionality continues to operate without any business interruption while the data's there. And then at the same time, you can be utilizing that time to kind of ramp up and build your other infrastructure on the Power Platform and continue on and expand your business into different directions while that Access front end keeps doing its job.
Okay, so you brought something up there that I didn't know about how this works. So you're saying an organization having a database in Access, they could migrate that to Dataverse, and they could carry on and build apps with a model-driven or canvas-based, ultimately get all the benefits of Power Automate, Power Virtual Agents, and Power Pages as part of that. Or, and this is, just correct me if I've heard you rightly here, you could migrate your data into Dataverse, but you could still use Access as your front end to that data sitting in Dataverse. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Wow, I did not know that.
That was again, like, that was really key to us because whenever you have a big shift in technology, there's always that disconnect period where people have to learn and catch up. If we were to take that and just put that into Dataverse and then tell everybody, okay, now just convert all your apps and you're ready to go. It's not going to have the kind of crawl, walk, run pattern we sometimes need to have in technology. We need people to be able to get their data into a secure place and meet those requirements. Maybe they're at a bank, or maybe they're at some other institution that has some financial or maybe even some governmental secure data that they want to have in some place that's a little bit tighter access restricted area. And so they put that in there. But at that time, they still need time to get their apps out. So they move their data over to meet that compliance regulation. And they could keep running. I mean, they could run on the Access client the entire time and not use any Power Apps if they decided to. It's totally possible. But it does open up that wider variety to them. So maybe they have a back office that continues to use their Access client apps, but then they have a bunch of mobile apps that their people out in the field use to go do some field work and report in or check in, they scan in at different locations and take pictures of things and type in details of their investigations, and then have that go back in, and somebody in the back office can actively use that data and start doing other processing with it. So it really does kind of open up a wider world of usage for Access as well. So even if they wanted to stay with the Access platform, they can get a lot of benefit from using this.
Yeah, okay, that's awesome. Tell me, some questions pop into my mind. Is there a license cost for this connector, or is it part of the connector suite?
So this connector is actually an Access side connector.
Wow.
And so it was built on the Access side to connect to Dataverse, and it uses our open OData APIs. And so because of that, there's no extra cost for the connector. So if you have a standard Dataverse license, for example, even Dataverse for Teams, for example, you can utilize that, and the connector that was built on Access will be able to connect to the systems and migrate the data over. Now, once that data is in Dataverse, you do have to have your Dataverse licensing that's necessary. So if you're using the full version, you'll have to have licenses for your users. But if you move it into Microsoft Data or Teams, Dataverse for Teams, then you're able to utilize the licensing you already have there and use the data in that way and migrate it over and connect to it.
Yeah, see, I didn't even think of that use case, right? Lighting it all up in Teams, which is, would be a massive win for a lot of organizations. Okay, so that's interesting. Is this all GA now, or is it about to GA? What's the status of it?
We went to GA just back at Build here in May, so we are live now worldwide. And really, the Dataverse side on the Power Platform Dataverse, there's really no change. The code is already there. It's part of native Dataverse. So really, all you have to do is just make sure that if you're using Access, you have the most recent version of Microsoft 365. It's right now in the Microsoft 365 version in the monthly builds, or it will also be in the quarterly when the quarterly build comes out, but it's not in the packaged product yet. The packaged product's going to be a little ways out just because of the timing for how they push out those bits. But if you've got the monthly drops as part of M365, you can use it right this moment.
Wow, that's awesome. So have you got any, without sharing names, have you got any use cases of like particular industries, organizations, etc., that are already going, this solves some problems for us?
We've had some government use. We've had some, hotel and, restaurant. We've also had some oil and gas looking at us.
Right.
And then also small businesses, small to medium businesses that want to utilize the functionality. Some beverage companies as well. So we kind of have run the gamut from small industry all the way up through government and for enterprise as well, of people who've started utilizing this. We had some early testers in our previews from many different agencies and groups that gave us a lot of great feedback and helped kind of mold the direction we were going. And the MVPs were really kind of key there as well, gave us a lot of fantastic feedback to make sure that we were ready to go. But overall, we kind of see just a wide range of different folks who find the applications really attractive.
Yeah.
We find that IT actually particularly are the group that's most excited about this. Either it's somebody who's really into the Power Platform and writing apps, or it's the IT team that says, I can click a few buttons and suddenly it's secure. That's fantastic. Let's do that.
Yeah. I mean, it's like one of the original shadow IT applications, right? Access and Excel, all those type of things that IT didn't know about. So I can imagine IT definitely wanting to wrap their arms around this and secure and get their data into compliance. If people want to go and find out more, I've got show notes and I'd love to put any kind of links, etc. Is there any kind of key locations, Microsoft Docs, what else to get up to speed in using this?
I'll put some links for you to use in the
Mm-hmm.
show notes, and they're out on Microsoft Docs. So we have some docs out on the Access side, which are
Yep.
really kind of explaining all the preparation you should do on the Access side.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's a few things to be aware of, some data type concerns that you have to be
Yes.
aware of, and things of that nature. And then we have the documents on the Dataverse side. And I've also created a number of videos that kind of show the actual
Fantastic.
migration process. So
Mm-hmm.
people can watch those, and they're like under 5 minutes, and you can kind of watch the process as it goes through, get an idea about what you'll need to do and become familiar with it, and utilize that as kind of your kicking off point. And then we've got a lot of other great resources out there with the various documentation and blog posts and other things, and as well as other users who've done some of the migration that have kind of made some posts about it, saying hey, I've done this and this works great, or
Mm-hmm.
this is something I'd like to see next time. And this is a feature that we are continuing to work on. This is the first version, making it
Great.
possible to migrate. Definitely have some improvements we want to be making as we continue forward. So it is an ongoing type of release.
Fantastic, fantastic. So it's not just going to be dropped as a V1 and that's it. That's it. You're migrating it forward as and continue to iterate.
Exactly. Mainly because we do have some, as I said, some data type restrictions.
Yeah.
So it's what's something that's really interesting. And I don't know, do we have time to talk about
Yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah. Totally, totally.
Yeah. So something that just is kind of interesting is Access has, because it is a fully formed, database and a whole relational functionality,
Mm.
that it has some data types that have been there for quite a while, and some of them have different data limits than Dataverse does. For
Mm-hmm.
example, one thing I found super interesting is Access allows you to have up to 2 gigabytes worth of data in a large text field,
Mm-hmm.
but the
Wow.
total size of an Access database is 2 gigabytes. So
Wow.
the likelihood of somebody putting all of their data and filling up their entire database with a single field is unlikely. So when the kind of the tricky part we had was, okay, well, we know they're not using 2 gigabytes. Our current maximum is 1 megabyte. So
Mm-mm-mm.
the truth is somewhere in the middle. And
Yeah.
so what we're doing right now is we have a bunch of telemetry that's running in a background.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
as people are doing these migrations, every time it catches a record and says this record's too big, we can't move it, we find out how big was that record, how often does this happen, and then maybe after we look at this data, it tells us we need to bump up to maybe 10 megabytes or 100 megabytes
Yeah,
to
yeah.
meet the needs of Access, but it's not 2 gigabytes. And so we're kind of keeping an eye on that. So that's kind of where some of those improvements are, is when we have some overages for things like that, or our decimal range is smaller than what
Mm.
we have in Access as well. And so again, if people are hitting that limit, our limits, it's not paltry. It's positive negative 100 billion with
Yeah.
10 decimal places. So it's
Mm-hmm.
a big
Mm-hmm.
number,
Mm.
but we are kind of tracking to see if it goes larger than that. And again, so we can kind of expand and deal with those. All those limitations I talked about are on the online documentation, by the way.
Nice.
And so that people can take that into account as they're looking to migrate. So yeah, so because of that, we do have some growth to do, to
Mm-hmm.
look at, are there spaces where we can increase certain values to better meet Access's needs? And so
Mm-mm-mm.
that's kind of like, as we're looking at this in an ongoing way, that's one of the things we're taking into account.
Was there any field types that just didn't have a logical mapping?
Yes. Right now, Ole does not have a logical mapping because Ole is used for a lot of different things in Access. And one thing it's used for is VB script, which we
Mm-hmm.
don't support. So that's one thing that Dataverse doesn't have, is VBA. And
Yeah.
that's kind of it's a ding in the minds of many of the people who use Access and who are Access developers, because they're used to
Mm-hmm.
using VBA for doing a lot of things. You can do all those same things with other scripting methods in Dataverse,
Mm-mm-mm.
but it's not a like a move over and plug it in and it works. So Ole itself, because it holds pictures and it holds scripts and it holds JSON and it holds other things,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
we still have some time to figure out what we can do with that, because there are some gaps that we just don't cover on our side as effectively. Also, another space is right now we currently are not using float values
Mm-hmm.
because, to be frank, the Dataverse float values have some work. They are insufficient for most float types and they're very, very underused. And we are in the process of trying to improve that. And so once those are improved, we'll allow float types over as well. So there's a few types that are still kind of held back, and all those are, fully disclosed on the
Mm-mm-mm-mm-mm.
documentation so people can make the right choice for them. If you try to move over data that's not supported, the migration tool will catch that and it will say, hey, we don't support these columns or we don't support these rows
Mm-hmm.
because they're
Mm-hmm.
too large. And then users can make a choice. They can choose that they want to just cancel out and not
Yep.
migrate over, which
Yep.
is totally fine. Or it will allow you to continue and move everything that can move over into Dataverse, and then the rest of it will stay in Access. And so at that point, say if you have pressure to meet your compliance and regulatory needs for data storage, you can move over all of your your decimal and your currency and all this other information and store that there. And maybe some of your other fields just aren't moved over. And you move over as much as you can into Dataverse and use it that way. So that's another option we provided for people because we knew we couldn't hit everything 100% on the first try.
Yeah.
So we wanted to make sure we got above 85% of the data types covered and sizes. And so we wanted to make sure that that was something that we could move forward with and give people a choice and also give them a pathway forward to work on this and then, maybe move stuff over later after we've got the ability to handle those other types.
Yeah, makes sense. What was the name of that field type that you said that holds the VB
OLE.
script?
OLE.
Yeah. So I wonder if there's an opportunity for somebody in the community to create a tool that does a translation to that to fetch or other scripting that would allow that to run, or is that something that Microsoft's thinking a building so it could ultimately get across just away from VB?
Honestly, we don't have a direct roadmap item to handle the OLE scripting at the moment. So if somebody from the community came up with something like that, that'd be pretty cool. I would be super impressed, and I'm sure a lot of people would be more than happy to use that. So that'd be a great opportunity for the community to kind of just jump in and solve a really kind of tricky, sticky problem that we have. And like another thing that we're looking to do right now that we don't have a full conversion for is calculated fields, but as you may be aware, we have just private previewed the PowerFX fields for formulas. And so we're thinking that we might be able to actually use PowerFX and do a lot of that translation and be able to, with minor code changes, maybe with a script or something, move everything over from calculated fields to formula fields. So that's like another area where we're kind of investigating and kind of testing and figuring stuff out. And if somebody in the community starts playing with it and says, hey, this is a great idea, I've got a solution for that, that'd be super cool.
Yeah, I like it. I just see that the XRM toolbox and might need another app added to its arsenal.
Definitely. We love that. We love all the ingenuity that people put into the XRM toolbox. As a matter of fact, I've had a couple other features I've released that people have immediately, I'll release a feature that's API only for a while. And with the next morning, I'll wake up and somebody in Australia or New Zealand has come up with a tool that helps out and gives people a UI for it in the span of like less than 24 hours. I'm like, wow, that's really cool.
Crazy. Nathan, before I let you go, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I would just like people to go out there and give it a try and see if that's something that might meet their needs. We wanted to make it, the whole reason behind this feature is really just to kind of meet customers' needs and solve problems. And so I'd really like to hear back from people on if this is meeting the need, if this is, up to snuff for what they would like. And if there's feedback that they have, I'm always very open to feedback. So through email or through my LinkedIn, you can contact me with any questions about any of the features I work on. And I would love to hear that feedback and have discussions with you about it.
Nathan, thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thank you.
Hey, thanks for listening. I'm your host, Business Application MVP Mark Smith, otherwise known as the NZ365 Guy. If there's a guest you'd like to see on the show from Microsoft, please message me on LinkedIn. If you want to be a supporter of the show, please check out buymeacoffee.com/NZ365 Guy. How will you create on the Power Platform today? Ciao.